Millionaire made his pregnant wife sign divorce papers, then proposed to his mistress. The world loves a scandal, and few scandals can outshine the dazzling fall from grace of a proud millionaire who once had it all: power, wealth, and the illusion of a perfect marriage. This is the story of Andrew Wellington, heir to a legendary fortune, whose charismatic smile masked a heart consumed by ambition and betrayal. When his wife Jennifer Collins found herself pregnant, she believed it was their moment of bliss, only to be blindsided when Andrew presented her with divorce papers. But the drama doesn't end there. Unbeknownst to everyone, Andrew's new mistress was waiting in the shadows for a ring and a proposal that would set this tumultuous saga ablaze. Andrew Wellington was, by all public accounts, the epitome of success. Tall, with piercing blue eyes and neatly combed dark hair, he exuded confidence from every pore. People whispered that he was born in a suit impeccably tailored, no wrinkles allowed, even as an infant. Coming from one of the oldest moneyed families in Manhattan, Andrew wielded influence in the city's real estate and venture capital circles like a scepter. Wherever he went, cameras flashed, reporters swarmed, and charity galas vied for his presence. Jennifer Collins couldn't have been more different from Andrew's privileged circle. Growing up in a middle-class home in upstate New York, she knew the value of every dollar. Her parents, Maria and Stephen Collins, ran a modest but beloved bakery, where Jennifer spent her teenage afternoons kneading dough, icing cakes, and listening to customers confide their everyday hopes and woes. She was intelligent, warm-hearted, and unguardedly trusting. Perhaps that was what Andrew found so refreshing when they first met at a friend's gallery opening in Soho. Surrounded by superficial socialites, Jennifer was a breath of authenticity, wearing a simple floral sundress and sandals, while everyone else flaunted name-brand suits and glittering designer gowns. From that first encounter, their courtship was swift and intense. Andrew invited Jennifer to exclusive events, introduced her to philanthropic committees, and took her on spontaneous weekend getaways aboard his family's yacht. Their wedding, though lavish, showcased the bridging of two distinct worlds: hers, grounded in familial love and sincerity; his, drowned in wealth, deals, and lofty expectations. Jennifer, starry-eyed, believed she'd found her fairy tale prince. She didn't understand that the glitz and glamour she was stepping into could quickly turn cold and isolating. The first year of their marriage still felt like a dream. Andrew indulged in heartfelt gestures, late-night dinners, dance lessons, front-row seats at Broadway shows. Yet bit by bit, a distance crept in. He began working longer hours, attending mysterious meetings behind locked doors. He sometimes returned home in the early hours of the morning, smelling of fine whiskey and expensive perfume that wasn't Jennifer's. Though her intuition quietly sounded an alarm, she convinced herself it was stress, business, or just the glimmering remnants of some high society party where wives were unwelcome. She believed him when he said he was only networking. She believed him because she loved him. Then came the day Jennifer realized she was pregnant. She was overjoyed, convinced this was the miracle that would rekindle their love. Andrew's initial reaction was pleasant enough. He forced a bright smile and wrapped her in a nervous embrace. But Jennifer sensed he was a million miles away, as though his mind was already calculating how a baby would factor into his carefully manicured empire. Still, she clung to hope. She filled her days with prenatal appointments, reading parenting books, and planning a nursery in their lavish penthouse. On weekends, she pleaded with Andrew to attend childbirth classes. He always agreed, only to cancel last minute with an excuse about a sudden business trip or pressing phone call. Nights became lonelier, with Jennifer falling asleep in a half-empty bed. It was during this fragile time that Jennifer first heard the name Isabella Moretti. A slip of the tongue by Andrew's personal assistant, an errant text message on his phone, a rumour whispered among the staff. She was, by all accounts, a stunning and enigmatic figure. Born to a wealthy Italian family, and known on the social circuit for her sultry presence and cunning intellect, Isabella had a reputation that drew envy from women and admiration from men. Jennifer tried to brush it off as more mindless gossip, something high society thrived upon. But deep inside, anxiety gnawed at her. It wasn't just gossip. It felt like the truth. Weeks later, Andrew returned from a trip to Capri, supposedly a real estate conference, acting colder than ever. He avoided Jennifer's gaze, declined to join her for dinner, and spent hours locked in his study. The silent tension mounted until Jennifer decided to address it. She walked into the study one evening, her hands trembling over the slight bulge forming in her abdomen, and pleaded, "Andrew, talk to me. Is there something going on, something you need to tell me?" He looked up from his laptop, face impassive, and simply shook his head. "I'm just busy, Jennifer." That was all he said. No reassurance, no gentle touch, nothing. Days later, Jennifer discovered the damning text messages on Andrew's phone. She had gone into his study to grab his phone charger, a benign enough act, but the device lit up with a text from Isabella, "Miss you already, amor. Tonight was unforgettable." Another message from the day before read, "Can't wait for the day we can be together without secrets." Jennifer's knees buckled. She sank into a chair, her heart racing, breath ragged. The truth was no longer a shadowy doubt. It was real, and it shattered her entire world in an instant. In the days that followed, Jennifer tried to hide the painful knowledge from her husband, waiting for the right moment to confront him. She was terrified of losing him, of a scandal, of bringing a child into a home that might soon split apart. Meanwhile, Andrew's distant behavior verged on cruelty. He spent more time with Harriet Caldwell, the family's lawyer, than he did with Jennifer. Late into the night, Jennifer heard him on phone calls, his voice low and urgent. Each time she tiptoed down the hall, she caught snippets of Andrew mentioning documents, discretion, and financial arrangements. A fearful suspicion bloomed inside her. Andrew was drafting divorce papers. On a Wednesday morning, Jennifer drove to her obstetrician appointment alone. Dr. Joseph Matthews, a well-respected physician at Mount Sinai Hospital, greeted her kindly. He had once been the family doctor for the Wellingtons. Yet as Jennifer sat on the exam table for her ultrasound, she couldn't help but notice Dr. Matthews' careful tone when he asked about her stress levels. The standard medical questions seemed laced with caution, as if he suspected the turmoil in her personal life. Jennifer forced a tight smile, urging him not to worry. But her heart pounded as she watched the ultrasound monitor reveal the faint flicker of her baby's heartbeat. The sight brought tears to her eyes. This was her child, her miracle, a life that deserved better than a broken home, mired in betrayal. Leaving the hospital, Jennifer's phone buzzed with a text from Andrew. "We need to talk. I'll be home by 6. Her stomach twisted. The phrase "we need to talk" loomed like a death knell over her fragile hopes. Sure enough, at 6 p.m., sharp, Andrew strolled into the penthouse living room, dropping a manila envelope on the coffee table. Without preamble, he spoke in his carefully measured tone. "Sign these. We'll settle financial terms. You'll be well taken care of." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "Andrew, I'm pregnant with your child," she said, voice trembling with desperation. "Why would you do this now? How can you be so callous?" He glanced away, a fleeting hint of guilt crossing his face. Then, steeling himself, he replied, "It's for the best. We're not compatible anymore, Jennifer. I don't want you to suffer in a loveless marriage. I'll ensure our child is provided for." Before she could even process his words, Andrew turned and left the room, leaving the envelope behind like a toxic parting gift. With shaking hands, Jennifer picked it up and found pages upon pages of legal jargon. The final page demanded her signature, effectively severing her relationship with Andrew Wellington and the life she had fought so hard to build. For hours, Jennifer sat immobilized, the papers on her lap. Memories flashed through her mind, the day Andrew proposed on that yacht under the fireworks, how he had sworn to love and cherish her. Now, all she had left were broken promises and an unborn child whose father was already walking away. That night, she dreamed about a dark ocean. She was alone on a tiny raft, storm clouds overhead, trying to shield her unborn baby from the howling winds. Andrew's voice echoed from somewhere far away, urging her to sign on the dotted line. She woke up in a cold sweat, tears streaming down her face. Her phone buzzed with another text, this time from Daniel Harrington, Andrew's longtime friend, who had always shown concern for Jennifer. "I heard something troubling. Are you okay?" Jennifer debated, responding. Ultimately, she couldn't face the pity or the questions. She left it unanswered, uncertain of who was truly in her corner anymore. The cruel reality was sinking in. Andrew Wellington, once her knight in shining armor, was now her chief adversary. 2 days later, Andrew insisted they have a formal meeting at Harriet Caldwell's office. Jennifer arrived, shoulders tense, heart fluttering with dread. Harriet, a stern woman with iron-grey hair pulled into a tight bun, greeted Jennifer with frosty politeness. Andrew was already there, seated in a plush leather chair, expression unreadable. Harriet slid another set of papers across the mahogany desk. "Miss S. Wellington," she began, "we can expedite this process, but we need your cooperation." Jennifer's voice quivered. "I can't do this right now. She hesitated, tears threatening to spill. "I'm pregnant. We're supposed to be a family." Harriet's mouth pressed into a thin line. "We understand, Miss S. Wellington. However, Mr. Wellington is committed to ensuring you receive substantial support. You won't be financially compromised. Money, always money." The cold efficiency with which Andrew and his lawyer regarded her heartbreak was staggering. Jennifer glanced at Andrew, hoping for a flicker of kindness, but his gaze remained distant. She stood abruptly, pressing a hand to her stomach. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice breaking. Then she fled, tears streaming down her cheeks. In the aftermath, Jennifer sought refuge at her mother's home upstate. Maria Collins welcomed her daughter with open arms, horrified by Andrew's actions, while the gentle hum of the bakery downstairs reminded Jennifer of simpler times. Her mind never truly escaped the swirling chaos waiting back in Manhattan. She confided in her mother over tea in the cozy living room. "He wants to tear our family apart before it's even begun," Jennifer sobbed. "I just don't understand how someone can change so drastically." Maria patted her daughter's hand. "He's always been ambitious, honey. I remember the first time he came here, how restless he looked, checking his watch, sizing up our little bakery like it was beneath him. But I never thought he'd be so cruel." They talked through the afternoon, trying to weigh Jennifer's options. Maria insisted that Jennifer should stand up to Andrew, prove the marriage was worth saving. Yet in Jennifer's heart, doubt festered. She couldn't win the affection of a man who'd already given his heart, and possibly his soul, to another woman. That evening, Jennifer received a phone call from Daniel Harrington, who had been Andrew's best friend since college. She decided to pick up this time, curiosity and desperation overriding her fear of pity. "Jennifer," Daniel began, his voice laced with concern, "I just heard about the divorce. I wanted you to know I'm here if you need anything." Against her better judgment, Jennifer decided to share at least part of her turmoil. In halting sentences, she told Daniel about the pregnancy, the betrayal, and the divorce papers. Daniel sighed heavily. "I suspected something was off with Andrew lately." He's been acting strange, especially since he started meeting up with Isabella Moretti more frequently. I tried to warn him not to ruin what he has with you, but he wouldn't listen. Jennifer's voice caught in her throat. It hurts more than I can explain. I never imagined we'd end up here. Let me help, Daniel said softly. Andrew trusts me, and I still have some influence over him. Maybe I can talk sense into him. Jennifer hung up, torn between relief and skepticism. She knew Andrew valued Daniel's opinion, but she also recognized Andrew was fully enchanted by Isabella. A last-ditch effort might be too little, too late. Days later, Daniel invited Jennifer to a lunch in Manhattan to discuss potential strategies. They met at a quiet bistro, far from the usual paparazzi-laden hotspots that Andrew frequented. Daniel, with his warm brown eyes and gentle demeanor, looked genuinely pained by Jennifer's distress. She laid out everything: her heartbreak, her fear for the baby, her confusion over how Andrew could flip like a switch. Daniel listened intently, then confessed something that chilled Jennifer to the bone. Andrew's father, the late Mark Wellington, arranged a complex trust fund that grants Andrew full control of the family fortune, but it comes with certain clauses. One of them states that if Andrew divorces without producing a legitimate heir, his share reverts partly to philanthropic trusts, specifically funds managed by Warren Buffett's philanthropic circle. I discovered references to this while working with Andrew on a property deal last year. My guess is, if Andrew divorces you before the baby is born, he thinks he can circumvent that clause by claiming the marriage was untenable. You and the baby would be cut out of certain entitlements unless you sign a mutual agreement. Jennifer reeled. You're saying he's divorcing me partly to protect his fortune from his own child? Daniel shook his head. Not exactly, but it's twisted. He might be trying to renegotiate terms behind the scenes. Isabella also has her eyes on his money. I've overheard her persuading him to secure everything before the baby arrives. She's manipulative, Jennifer. She's pushing for control. A spark of anger flared in Jennifer's eyes. Andrew's betrayal now felt even more sinister. It wasn't just about love lost, it was about financial power and a mistress eager to sink her claws into the Wellington empire. Jennifer realized in that moment that she needed to fight not just for her own dignity, but for her unborn child's future. Back at the Wellington penthouse, Andrew was meticulously planning a grand soiree, an elite charity gala underwritten by the family foundation. The event would be the perfect stage to introduce the world to the next phase of his life, or so he believed. Isabella Moretti, the rumored mistress, had returned from Europe and was already making waves among New York's upper crust. Her appearance at the gala would undoubtedly cause a stir. Jennifer learned about this event through a society column, ironically penned by Harriet Samuels in the Palm Beach Post, who mentioned Andrew Wellington and his close friend Isabella Moretti were hosting a major charity auction. The mention of Isabella in the same breath as Andrew's philanthropic endeavors felt like a slap to the face. Jennifer recognized Isabella's infiltration was swift and merciless. She was asserting her presence on Andrew's arm publicly, effectively pushing Jennifer into the shadows. While Andrew finalized the gala's guest list, Jennifer grew determined to attend uninvited if she had to. If Andrew wanted to flaunt Isabella in public, Jennifer would not be cowering at her mother's bakery. She wanted Andrew to see her, to remember she was no pushover, that she refused to vanish quietly. The night of the gala arrived. Jennifer chose a form-fitting, floor-length gown in emerald green that subtly accentuated her pregnant figure. She styled her hair in soft waves, applied a bold red lipstick, and carried herself with a calm poise she hardly felt inside. Paparazzi lined the plush carpet leading into the grand ballroom. Flashes exploded in quick succession as she emerged from a black sedan, her face resolute. Inside, the room was a spectacle of opulent chandeliers dripping with crystals, tables adorned with fresh orchids, and waiters circulating with trays of champagne. Jennifer spotted Andrew almost immediately, standing by the stage with Isabella by his side. Isabella was everything the rumors promised: tall, model-like, in a shimmering silver gown that clung to her every curve. Her dark hair spilled seductively over one shoulder, and her fingers were entwined with Andrew's in a manner far too intimate for a business associate. The moment Andrew's eyes locked on Jennifer, a flicker of surprise, then annoyance, crossed his features. He whispered something to Isabella, who turned and followed his gaze. A smirk curved Isabella's red lips, as if mocking Jennifer's presence. Summoning every ounce of composure, Jennifer approached them. "Andrew," she said politely, her voice only trembling slightly. "I didn't realize our charity events were invite-only these days." Andrew swallowed, likely thrown off by Jennifer's boldness. "Jennifer, this is not the place." "I'm in the middle of," Isabella cut in, extending a manicured hand. "Isabella Moretti. Lovely to meet you, Jennifer. I've heard so much about you." Jennifer forced a polite smile. "I'm sure you have." Tension crackled in the air. Guests in the vicinity sensed the awkwardness. Glancing curiously at the trio, Andrew cleared his throat and placed a hand on Isabella's back as though staking his claim. "We're here for an important cause tonight. Let's not make a scene." Without warning, Jennifer's voice rose, not quite loud enough to cause a disruption, but enough to catch Andrew off guard. "Is that what you told our unborn child? That it's not the place for them either?" Andrew's jaw tightened. Isabella's eyes sparkled with triumph, as though Jennifer's raw emotion was exactly the reaction she wanted. Before more words could be exchanged, Daniel Harrington sidled up to them, taking Jennifer gently by the elbow. "Jennifer, let's step outside for a moment." She allowed herself to be guided out onto the terrace, where the city skyline glittered under the night sky. She took deep, shaky breaths, tears threatening to spill over. "I couldn't let him publicly flaunt her without reminding him he still has responsibilities," she murmured. Daniel nodded. "I understand. But trust me, humiliating him in public isn't going to solve anything. He's too proud. He'll dig in harder." As they stood there, Harriet Samuels, the Society columnist, emerged, camera in hand. She'd caught wind of the friction. Instinctively, Daniel maneuvered to shield Jennifer from any prying questions. "No comment, Harriet," he insisted, leading Jennifer away before she became the night's gossip headline. The following morning, Jennifer woke up to a flurry of social media posts and tabloid headlines about the awkward triangle at the Wellington Gala. While Andrew's PR team scrambled to spin the story, Jennifer realized the public now had a taste of the drama. The facade of the perfect Wellington marriage was crumbling fast. An urgent message blinked on Jennifer's phone from Harriet Caldwell's office, demanding that she finalize the divorce settlement or face an aggressive legal approach. Jennifer read the message with cold dread. Andrew was done pretending to care for her feelings. He wanted her out of the picture. After hours of contemplation, Jennifer decided to seek her own legal counsel. She contacted a recommended attorney, Margaret Healy, who specialized in high-profile family disputes. In a sunlit conference room overlooking Central Park, Jennifer recounted her story: her marriage to Andrew, the discovery of his affair, the pregnancy, and the trust fund clauses that Daniel had revealed. Margaret took meticulous notes, her hazel eyes narrowing. "You have more power here than you realize," she said, tapping a pen against her notebook. "If you can prove Andrew is divorcing you in bad faith, especially under pressure from Isabella, and that financial motivations play a role in disclaiming paternity or cutting you out, you can fight for a substantial settlement. More importantly, you can secure a future for your child." Jennifer exhaled a shaky breath. "I don't want a drawn-out court battle. I just want what's fair for the baby." Margaret's expression softened. "I understand. However, From what you've shared, Andrew is less likely to respond to emotional pleas. He's built a fortress around his empire. We need to be strategic. Within the next week, Jennifer signed a retainer with Margaret. They filed motions to contest the initial divorce papers, demanding more favorable terms and stating the unborn child's interests. The legal war had officially begun. While the lawyers dueled in offices and courtrooms, Jennifer found herself grappling with a surge of mixed emotions: love, anger, betrayal, fear. Nights blurred into restless dreams, and even daily tasks felt like navigating a fog. The baby's gentle kicks reminded her that life persisted within her, a quiet beacon of hope in this storm. During one of her sleepless nights, Jennifer recalled how she had first caught a glimpse of Andrew's complexity. It was at a dinner party early in their relationship, when Mark Wellington, the patriarch, was still alive. Over cigars and brandy, Mark boasted about the Wellington legacy, regaling guests with tales of power and wealth. Jennifer had noticed Andrew's jaw clench, the way his eyes flashed resentment whenever his father bragged about controlling the family's direction. She realized now that Andrew's ruthless streak might be inherited. Mark had molded Andrew to protect the family fortune at all costs. At times, Jennifer couldn't help but wonder if Andrew had ever truly loved her, or if she had simply been a charming addition to his public image. Perhaps, in the early days, he'd been attracted to her sincerity, her warmth, and her refusal to be impressed by his money. But ambition and greed had a way of corroding even the purest feelings. One afternoon, seeking a distraction, Jennifer flipped through the social pages. She paused on an old article discussing Andrew's philanthropic partnership with Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, praising his youth and vision. Photographs showed Andrew shaking hands with the billionaires at a foundation dinner. The same piece mentioned Mark Wellington's philanthropic trusts, those that might revert to charity if Andrew's marriage didn't produce an heir. There it was, a real, tangible hint that the Wellington Empire was always overshadowed by carefully orchestrated legalities. Feeling an odd urge to verify the details, Jennifer scheduled a meeting with Daniel Harrington, who had access to many of the Wellington archives. She wanted clarity about the trust fund stipulations, everything her father-in-law had orchestrated from beyond the grave. They met in Daniel's downtown office, quiet on a late Friday afternoon. Tall windows overlooked the bustling city streets. "I appreciate you coming," Jennifer began. "I need to be absolutely certain about these legal details that might affect my child." Daniel nodded and produced a couple of folders. "I looked into the Mark Wellington Trust. It's complicated, but one thing stands out. If Andrew has a legitimate heir, that child is entitled to a certain portion of the estate, managed in trust until adulthood. If Andrew divorces you before the child is born, he might try to contest paternity or negotiate the trust's disbursement. That's likely why Harriet Caldwell is pressing so hard for a swift divorce. They want to avoid additional claims." Jennifer's anger simmered. He's trying to pretend the child isn't his so he can protect his money. That's deplorable. Daniel's gaze softened. "I don't think he'll outright deny paternity if you force the issue. He might, however, try to manipulate you into a settlement that's less than what the child is legally entitled to." Jennifer swallowed hard, hating that she had to think of her unborn baby in terms of financial battles. But Andrew had forced her hand. Meanwhile, Isabella Moretti was reveling in her role as Andrew's new muse. She moved into a lavish apartment just blocks from Andrew's penthouse. The tabloids were rife with speculation about their burgeoning romance, especially after they were spotted vacationing in street Barts together. Behind the scenes, however, Andrew's business interests were taking a hit. Rumors of his messy personal life made investors skittish and potential partners worried about Andrew's judgment. Some of his board members at Wellington Ventures questioned his decision-making, while others quietly distanced themselves, not wanting to be caught in the crossfire of a scandal. One evening, Andrew invited Isabella to a private dinner in the penthouse. The day had been rough. His phone buzzed non-stop with calls from Harriet about the divorce proceedings. Documents from Margaret Healy indicated that Jennifer was pushing for spousal support, a robust trust for the child, and a share of the Wellington assets that rivaled what Mark Wellington's trust would have mandated anyway. If Andrew refused, they'd see him in court. Isabella sipped her wine, her dark eyes dancing with intrigue. "Darling, you can't let that woman run circles around you. Didn't you mention you wanted to propose to me once this is over? How can we move forward with a costly legal battle weighing us down?" Andrew pinched the bridge of his nose. "You don't think I know that? I'm working on it. But Jennifer has a top-notch attorney." Isabella's smile was cunning. "We can't have her winning public sympathy, especially not with that baby on the way. Let your lawyers handle the negotiations. We focus on us, on our future." She leaned in, resting a hand on Andrew's thigh. "Once the baby's born, you'll pay child support, but that doesn't mean she has to get half the kingdom." Andrew stared at his wineglass. "I never wanted it to escalate like this. Things were supposed to be smooth and private." Isabella laughed softly, the sound chilling. "We can't always dictate how these things play out, but we can make sure we come out on top." Andrew forced a tight smile, but inside, unease roiled. He thought back to a conversation he once had with Jennifer early in their marriage about wanting a stable family, a legacy built on something more than money. Now, that ideal felt like a foreign dream. He had chosen ambition, lust, and greed. There was no turning back. Weeks blurred with court filings, depositions, and tense negotiations. Jennifer continued living with her mother in upstate New York, finding moments of solace in the bakery. Kneading dough became a meditation, a reminder that life could still be simple and wholesome. Each passing day, her baby bump grew more visible, fueling her resolve to persevere. One afternoon, while helping her mother decorate a wedding cake, Jennifer felt a sharp pang in her abdomen, followed by dizziness. Alarmed, Maria rushed her to the local clinic, where Dr. Robert Green, a longtime family friend, performed a checkup. After an ultrasound and some tests, he looked at Jennifer seriously. "You're under an incredible amount of stress, and it's affecting your blood pressure. You need rest and minimal anxiety, especially in your second trimester. If this continues, you risk complications." Jennifer nodded, tears brimming. "I'm trying, Dr. Green, but everything in my life is spiraling." Maria placed a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Your health and the baby come first. We'll find a way to reduce the stress." That evening, Jennifer called Margaret Healy, telling her about the doctor's recommendation. Margaret immediately filed motions for a temporary restraining order against excessive legal harassment, requesting that Andrew's team refrain from unnecessary contact and intimidation. It was a small victory, giving Jennifer a chance to breathe. Ironically, with the legal hounds muzzled, at least temporarily, Andrew found himself in an awkward position. Isabella grew impatient, demanding updates about the divorce's progress and pushing Andrew for a marriage proposal. Andrew promised her it was only a matter of time, but the more pressure Isabella applied, the more Andrew felt the walls closing in. As autumn leaves began to fade, Andrew received notice that Jennifer was due in court to finalize a few details regarding financial disclosures. Reluctantly, he flew upstate, deciding to check on her under the guise of facilitating legal documents. Upon arrival, he stepped into the bakery's comforting aroma of freshly baked bread, so out of place compared to the Manhattan high-rises and penthouse boardrooms. He found Jennifer behind the counter, gently wiping flour from her hands. Their eyes met across the small, homey space. For the first time in months, Andrew hesitated, as if grappling with regret. Up close, Jennifer's pregnancy was undeniable, her face softer, her belly rounded. She looked exhausted yet radiant, a testament to the new life inside her. "What do you want, Andrew?" she asked quietly, refusing to display any vulnerability. Andrew tried to muster indifference, but his voice wavered. "I'm here for the hearing tomorrow. Harriet Caldwell asked me to sign some documents." He paused, then awkwardly added, "You look, well." A bitter laugh escaped Jennifer's lips. "I'm trying to be well, despite everything." Silence stretched between them. The memory of love once shared lingered in the air, mingling with the sweet scent of cinnamon rolls. Andrew's gaze dropped to Jennifer's stomach. "How is the baby?" he asked, voice hushed. Jennifer studied him. It might have been the first time he'd shown a hint of genuine concern since she announced her pregnancy. "The baby is fine, thanks to me. I'm doing everything I can to ensure that remains true." Andrew nodded, guilt flickering across his features. But before he could form another word, Maria emerged from the back, eyes narrowing at the sight of her son-in-law. She offered no greeting, only a curt nod. Andrew took it as a sign that his welcome was limited. "I'll see you in court," he murmured, turning to leave. Jennifer stood still, heart pounding. She realized how Andrew's momentary glimpse of concern didn't erase the betrayal, nor did it solve the looming battle over their child's future. The next day, the small-town courthouse was abuzz. Reporters had descended, keen to capture every nuance of the high-profile couple's drama. Margaret Healy and Harriet Caldwell exchanged chilly pleasantries outside the courtroom, their respective clients standing on opposite sides. Inside, the judge reviewed the motions. Jennifer found herself trembling under the courthouse's fluorescent lighting. She was asked to testify about her financial situation, her efforts to support the unborn child, and her understanding of Andrew's responsibilities. Harriet Caldwell peppered her with pointed questions, insinuating that she was trying to trap Andrew for financial gain. Margaret rose swiftly in objection. "Miss S. Wellington is merely requesting the support and recognition owed by law for her unborn child. Mr. Wellington's mistress is publicly flaunting their relationship, and the abruptness of these divorce proceedings strongly suggests an intent to deprive Miss S. Wellington of her rightful share." The judge, a stern-faced woman, rapped her gavel lightly. "I've heard enough on this matter for today. Given Miss S. Wellington's medical concerns, I'm inclined to grant a protective order limiting the frequency of direct legal confrontations until after the baby is born. Additionally, Mr. Wellington will be responsible for medical expenses related to the pregnancy. We will reconvene for further negotiations in a month." With that, the session concluded. Jennifer sighed in relief, though the weight of uncertainty remained. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Andrew hurried into a sleek black car, Isabella at his side, while Jennifer watched from the steps, fighting back tears. The final confrontation was still pending, and the pressure was rising. In a move that stunned even the tabloids, Andrew proposed to Isabella Moretti during a grand party at the Waldorf Astoria the following week. The spectacle was as ostentatious as one might expect. A 10-carat diamond ring, a string quartet, champagne flutes brimming with vintage Dom Perignon. Flashy images of Isabella's triumphant smile, ring glittering under the chandelier, dominated the next morning's headlines. Jennifer watched the coverage from her bedroom, tears coursing silently down her cheeks. There it was, the father of her child, publicly pledging himself to another woman, effectively erasing Jennifer from his life as though she were a trivial footnote. Anger bubbled in her chest, but overshadowing it was a deep sorrow. She mourned not just her shattered marriage, but the illusions she once cherished, a future built on love and partnership. When she could compose herself, she called Daniel. His voice sounded weary. "I'm sorry, Jennifer. He's letting Isabella dictate his life now." Jennifer took a shaky breath. "I won't let them destroy mine. I'm going to protect my baby, and I'll do whatever it takes." Behind the scenes, Isabella reveled in her new fiancé status. She made appearances on society talk shows, sashayed down red carpets on Andrew's arm, and dropped hints about a lavish wedding in Lake Como. Yet Andrew's business woes grew deeper. Several major investors, wary of personal scandals, withdrew or froze their capital commitments. Even within the Wellington family trust, murmurs arose about Andrew's judgment, questioning if he was tarnishing a once-respected brand. Isabella consoled Andrew with empty platitudes. "They'll come around. Money follows success, and will generate success as soon as this divorce is settled. Besides, we can rebrand, start fresh." But Andrew began noticing subtle, warning signs, messages on Isabella's phone from unknown names, glimpses of suspicious receipts for high-end purchases in her name that he hadn't approved. When he questioned her, Isabella brushed it off with a tinkling laugh. "A girl needs her indulgences, darling. Let's not bicker over petty details." Late one night, Andrew awakened to find Isabella talking in hushed whispers on her phone. The conversation ended abruptly when she realized he was listening. A small seed of doubt took root in Andrew's mind. He had risked everything for this woman. Had he miscalculated her loyalty? In the final weeks of Jennifer's pregnancy, she encountered increasing discomfort and bouts of fatigue. Maria insisted that Jennifer avoid any stress, but the legal proceedings had reached another critical juncture. Andrew and Jennifer were scheduled for a mediation session, their last attempt to settle before a full-blown trial. The mediators, assigned by the court, urged compromise. Margaret Healy laid out Jennifer's demands: a guaranteed trust for the child, full coverage of all medical and education expenses, and a reasonable spousal support package. Andrew, seated across the table, fidgeted with his pen. Isabella's presence hovered in the corridor like a malevolent spectre, even though she wasn't allowed inside the mediation room. Andrew's lawyer, Harriet, offered a counter-proposal, a lump sum payment and minimal child support contingent on Jennifer signing a non-disclosure agreement about the Wellington family affairs. The mediator frowned, sensing the imbalance. "Mr. Wellington, you understand that your unborn child is entitled to more than a token gesture." Andrew's eyes flickered with frustration. "She's trying to take advantage of my name," he said, his voice wavering with the same rehearsed indignation Harriet had used in court. But the words rang hollow. He knew better than anyone how the trust's clauses worked, and how he was attempting to secure his empire for Isabella. Jennifer's calm facade crumbled. She stood, placing a protective hand over her belly. "I won't let you reduce our baby to a line item on a balance sheet." Andrew averted his gaze, saying nothing. In that moment, Jennifer realized that the man she'd once loved was trapped by pride and manipulation. He was unwilling to break free, even if it meant sacrificing his integrity. Unable to reach an agreement, the mediator declared the session at an impasse. They'd have to proceed to court after the child's birth, as the judge had previously ruled that Jennifer's health was paramount. Life has a way of refusing to wait for the perfect moment. Late one evening, Jennifer was rushed to the hospital with contractions. She was nearly a month early, her nerves frayed, her body exhausted from the stress. Maria held her hand through the labor, tears of worry in her eyes. After an arduous delivery, Jennifer welcomed a baby boy into the world, Lucas Wellington Collins. The moment she held him, her heart flooded with a love so fierce it eclipsed every fear, every betrayal. His tiny fingers wrapped around hers, reassuring her that no matter how bleak things seemed, they had each other. Word of the birth reached Andrew via Daniel. For a moment, Andrew felt his chest constrict with emotions he couldn't name: regret, longing, maybe even love. But Isabella insisted. "She'll use this baby to bleed you dry, Andrew." Torn and conflicted, Andrew arrived at the hospital the next day, flowers in hand, faced with the reality of fatherhood. He found Jennifer cradling Lucas in a quiet room, dim lights casting soft shadows. Something in Andrew's expression shifted as he saw the baby. He reached out, gently brushing the infant's cheek with the back of his hand. Lucas stirred, blinking up at this stranger. Tears blurred Andrew's vision. He'd never felt so vulnerable. But Isabella's voice echoed in his mind, reminding him of the divorce, the legal fights, the future he was building with her. Abruptly, he pulled away, as though remembering his role. Jennifer watched, tears in her eyes. She didn't speak, sensing the battle raging inside him. For one fleeting moment, she saw the Andrew she fell in love with, the one who once promised her the world. Then he turned and left the room, as if to escape the consequences of his own choices. As Jennifer recovered, a storm brewed in Andrew's life. He discovered that Isabella had been siphoning funds from various business accounts into a private offshore holding. Suspicious invoices and shady transactions revealed she'd been meticulously funneling money away, presumably to secure her own future. The revelation cut Andrew to the core. He'd betrayed Jennifer for this woman, only to be used as a stepping stone in Isabella's quest for wealth. Desperate to salvage his finances and reputation, Andrew confronted Isabella in their penthouse one stormy evening. Rain lashed the windows as thunder shook the building. "You've been stealing from me," he accused, voice trembling with fury and hurt. "Why?" Isabella didn't even bother denying it. She rolled her eyes, leaning casually against the kitchen island. "Call it an insurance policy, dear. You made grand promises about a future together, but we both know money is the real power here. Don't pretend you're any different." Andrew clenched his fists, the weight of his own hypocrisy pressing down on him. He had chosen greed and ambition over loyalty. Now he was reaping the results. "We're done," he spat, grabbing his coat. "Get out, or I'll call the authorities." Isabella merely smirked, slipping a diamond ring off her finger and setting it on the counter. "Keep the ring, keep your empire. I have what I need." She walked out into the night, leaving Andrew to realize that the empire he'd fought so hard to protect now felt like a hollow shell. In the days that followed, Andrew's life became a whirlwind of damage control. He pursued legal action against Isabella, locked down the compromised accounts, and faced the scorn of colleagues who had warned him about letting personal drama interfere with business. The tabloids delighted in the fallout. Wellington's Mistress flees with fortune screamed headlines. Amid the chaos, Andrew found himself thinking about Lucas. He reached out to Jennifer, requesting permission to visit their son. Reluctantly, Jennifer agreed, on the condition that Andrew came alone with no lawyers in tow. When Andrew arrived at the Collins home, the atmosphere felt tense, but less hostile than before. Maria, watching from a distance, offered a polite nod, though it was clear she harbored deep resentment. Jennifer invited Andrew into the nursery, where Lucas lay in a crib decorated with soft blues and whites. The baby stirred, and Andrew gently lifted him, heart thudding in his chest. The tiny weight of Lucas in his arms felt monumental. Glancing up, Andrew noticed tears shimmering in Jennifer's eyes. She stood quietly, arms crossed, protective. He knew he didn't deserve her forgiveness or even a second chance. But the love he felt for his son was undeniable, and for the first time, Andrew realized how severely he had damaged everything that truly mattered. Jennifer's voice was soft when she finally spoke. "He's healthy, strong. The doctor said he'll catch up quickly, even though he was early." Andrew nodded, rocking Lucas slowly. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice cracking, "for everything." Tears rolled down Jennifer's cheeks, but she didn't reply. The apology was so small, so late, it could hardly mend the months of betrayal and anguish. Still, Andrew's willingness to show vulnerability in front of his son was a start, maybe a fragile step, toward redemption. Over the next weeks, Andrew made an effort to be present for Lucas, offering financial support, checking on him regularly, even volunteering to babysit. He hired a team of nannies and child development specialists, but Jennifer remained cautious, not wanting Lucas to be used as a pawn in Andrew's quest to repair his public image. They continued to have tense phone calls about the final divorce settlement, but both agreed Lucas deserved the best possible environment. One afternoon, Andrew arrived unannounced with a stuffed bear larger than the crib. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. "He's not old enough to appreciate that," she remarked, though a hint of amusement glinted in her eyes. Andrew rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. "I realize that. I guess. I just want him to have what I never did." Jennifer frowned, confused. "You had everything money could buy, everything except two parents who genuinely loved each other," Andrew admitted. "My father was always away, handling business, and my mother, she indulged her own social life. I barely saw them together unless it was a photo op." For a moment, sympathy welled up in Jennifer. She placed the oversized bear aside. "Andrew, money can't erase the damage you've done. But if you truly want to be a father, to be in Lucas's life, you need to step up consistently and do the right thing. No more manipulations." Andrew nodded, his expression earnest. "I will." Eventually, the postponed court date arrived, set to finalize custody, child support, and the divorce terms. Jennifer was adamant that while she didn't trust Andrew romantically, she would allow co-parenting if it was in Lucas's best interest. Margaret Healy strategized that a fair settlement could be reached if Andrew accepted responsibility without dragging Jennifer into further legal warfare. Andrew, chastened by Isabella's betrayal and desperate to salvage whatever was left of his integrity, approached Harriet Caldwell with instructions to offer generous concessions to Jennifer. Harriet, though initially taken aback, complied. In a dramatic twist, Andrew took the stand during the hearing and confessed, under oath, that his affair and financial motivations played a significant role in filing for divorce. He admitted to orchestrating a scenario where Jennifer was pressured to sign the papers, acknowledging that his actions were cruel and self-serving. Jennifer listened, tears in her eyes, as Andrew publicly owned up to his wrongdoing. While it didn't erase her pain, his confession paved the way for a more compassionate settlement. The judge commended both sides for finally reaching a reasonable agreement, full shared custody, a substantial trust for Lucas, and a fair spousal support arrangement that allowed Jennifer to rebuild her life independently. In the hallway after court, Andrew approached Jennifer hesitantly. She studied him for a moment, remembering the heartbreak, the betrayal, and the man she once loved. "Thank you," she said softly, "for telling the truth." He sighed, the weight of months of deceit lifting from his shoulders. "I owed you that much." With the divorce officially granted, Jennifer began a new chapter. She moved into a modest but comfortable apartment in a family-friendly neighborhood, using part of the settlement to secure a stable future for Lucas. She also expanded her mother's bakery business, investing in modern equipment and marketing to attract a broader customer base. The simple life she always cherished started to blossom again, this time enriched by the bond she shared with her son. Andrew, on the other hand, worked tirelessly to repair his fractured reputation and stabilize Wellington Ventures. He took a step back from the limelight, focusing more on responsible leadership. Occasionally, he reflected on how he had nearly lost himself in pursuit of a mistress's approval, only to discover she was using him all along. It was a painful lesson, but one that reshaped his priorities. He and Jennifer maintained a cordial relationship for Lucas's sake. Weekend visits and shared holidays became opportunities to foster a sense of family for their son. Each time Andrew saw Lucas giggle or take a tentative step, he felt a pang of regret that he hadn't chosen fatherhood over ambition from the beginning. Months passed, each day a little brighter than the last. Lucas reached milestones: his first smile, first crawl, first babbling words. Jennifer relished motherhood, discovering a quiet strength she never knew she possessed. Supportive friends, new business ventures, and the unwavering love of her mother helped her heal from Andrew's betrayal. Then, on a warm spring afternoon, Andrew asked if he could take Lucas to the park, hoping to spend quality time outdoors. Jennifer agreed, cautiously optimistic. Watching from a park bench, she saw Andrew kneel in the grass, gently guiding Lucas's tiny steps. The sun filtered through the trees, illuminating the scene like a painting. For a fleeting moment, Jennifer felt a sense of bittersweet contentment. Their marriage was over, but something sacred, a shared love for Lucas, remained. When Andrew returned, Lucas giggling happily in his arms, he offered Jennifer a rare, genuine smile. "He's growing so fast," Andrew murmured, eyes filled with wonder. "Thank you for letting me be a part of this." She nodded, noticing that while the regret in his expression remained, it was tempered by sincere affection for their child. Life had shattered their union, but it had also woven them together in a new way. And so ends this tumultuous chapter of betrayal, heartbreak, and redemption, an extraordinary reminder that even in life's darkest hours, hope can still flicker. Andrew Wellington, once blinded by power and seduced by greed, ultimately faced the staggering price of his choices. Jennifer Collins, fortified by unwavering determination and the love of those who stood by her, proved that one can rise above ruin and protect what truly matters. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If you found yourself captivated by Jennifer's resilience, Andrew's downfall, and the ultimate triumph of love for their son, Lucas, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Share this story with friends who might need inspiration in their own struggles. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama fiction that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Together, let's continue exploring tales that remind us, no storm lasts forever.
The sound that broke the silence wasn't the polite chime of a dinner bell or the gentle clinking of crystal. It was the sickening wet thud of a body hitting the marble floor. My body. 7 months pregnant. At the bottom of the grand staircase I had so lovingly decorated for the holidays just days before. As my vision blurred and the world spun into a vortex of pain and terror, I saw 2 things I will never forget. The shocked, horrified faces of my parents and in-laws, their mouths agape. And above them at the top of the stairs, my husband, Julian. His face a mask of cold indifference, standing beside his mistress, Chloe. And she was smiling. No, not just smiling. She was cheering. Life with Julian Ashford was like living inside a snow globe. From the outside it was perfect, a picturesque scene of wealth, love, and privilege. Our wedding had been a feature in Vogue, a lavish affair at his family's sprawling Connecticut estate, a place of manicured lawns and ancestral portraits that watched with unnervingly stoic eyes. Julian was everything a woman was told to dream of, impossibly handsome, with eyes the color of a summer sky, and a smile that could disarm armies. He was the heir to the Ashford & Sons financial empire, a dynasty built on old money and ruthless ambition. I, Elara Vance, was not from that world. My parents, David and Sarah, were university professors. They had a cozy, book-filled home in Boston, where the richest aromas were old paper and my mother's baking. They'd given me a world of love, not luxury. When I met Julian at a university fundraiser, where I was volunteering, I was swept away by his charm, his attentiveness, his seeming adoration for my much simpler world. He said he was tired of debutantes and heiresses. He loved my authenticity. I believed him. Our first 2 years of marriage were a whirlwind of private jets galas in Paris and lazy Sundays in our stunning Manhattan brownstone. But slowly the gilded cage began to feel less like a palace and more like a prison. Julian's attentiveness waned, replaced by long, unexplained nights at the office. His charming smile became a tool he used to deflect my questions. His family, particularly his mother Isabella, never truly accepted me. To her, I was a common sparrow who had somehow managed to mate with her prized eagle. She treated me with a polished, venomous condescension, her compliments always double-edged swords. "That dress is lovely, Alara. It's wonderful how you can make high street fashion look almost couture." Discovering I was pregnant was like a sudden burst of sunlight in a darkening room. I thought a child, an heir, would change everything. It would solidify my place in the family, and more importantly, bring Julian back to me. For a while it seemed to work. He was ecstatic, touching my still flat stomach with a reverence I hadn't seen in years. He paraded me around to his family and friends, the proud father-to-be. Isabella even thawed slightly, beginning to plan the nursery with an iron fist, insisting on only the finest imported Italian furniture. The family gathering was Isabella's idea. A formal dinner at the Connecticut estate to celebrate the future of the Ashford line. It was a crisp October evening, the air smelling of wood smoke and decaying leaves. My parents drove down from Boston, looking slightly overwhelmed as they passed through the wrought iron gates, but they were determined to be there for me and their first grandchild. The estate was a character in itself, a sprawling Gothic revival mansion with more rooms than I could count, filled with dark wood, heavy tapestries, and an oppressive silence that even a house full of people couldn't quite pierce. The centerpiece was the grand staircase, a magnificent sweeping structure of carved mahogany that cascaded from the second floor down to the black and white marble foyer. It was beautiful, but standing at the top always gave me a dizzying sense of vertigo. That evening, the tension was a palpable entity in the room. Julian was agitated, constantly checking his phone. His father, Richard, a man who had long ago ceded all authority to his wife, was nursing a scotch in the corner, looking weary. Isabella was holding court, making passive-aggressive remarks about my parents' quaint academic life. My own parents were trying their best, smiling politely, while my father David kept a protective eye on me. "Julian, darling, put that phone away," Isabella commanded, her voice slicing through the strained conversation. "We have guests." Julian shot her a dark look, but pocketed his phone. He walked over to the bar to pour himself a drink, his movements stiff and angry. I followed him, placing a hand on his arm. "Is everything all right, sweetheart?" I asked softly, my 7-month bump pressing against him. He flinched, pulling his arm away, as if my touch had burned him. "Everything's fine, Alara. Just business." His eyes were cold, distant. They were the eyes of a stranger. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. This wasn't just a bad mood. Something was terribly wrong. My mother Sarah must have sensed it too, because she crossed the room and gently squeezed my shoulder. "Maybe you should sit down, dear. You've been on your feet for a while." Before I could answer, the deep, resonant chime of the doorbell echoed through the cavernous hall. The butler, a man named Peters, who had been with the family for 40 years, moved to answer it. "I'm not expecting anyone else," Isabella said, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows knitting together in annoyance. Julian's face went pale. He downed the rest of his whiskey in one gulp and stared at the grand entrance, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitching. The heavy oak doors swung open, and a woman stood, silhouetted against the deepening twilight. She was tall and slender, dressed in a blood-red dress that clung to her like a second skin. Her hair was a sheet of raven black, and her red lips were curved into a smug, confident smirk. I didn't know who she was, but I knew with a bone-deep, gut-wrenching certainty that her arrival was the beginning of the end. Her eyes scanned the room, skipping over everyone else and landing directly on Julian. Then she spoke, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. "Julian, darling, you didn't tell me you were starting the party without me." Her name was Chloe, and she was the reason my perfect world was about to shatter into a million pieces. The silence that followed Chloe's entrance was so absolute, it felt like the air had been sucked from the room. Every eye was fixed on her, then flickered to Julian, then to me. It was a triangle of betrayal drawn in sharp public lines. My parents looked utterly bewildered. Richard Ashford seemed to shrink further into the shadows, but it was Isabella's reaction that was the most chilling. There was no shock on her face, only a flicker of annoyance, as if Chloe's arrival was merely a poorly timed inconvenience, not a catastrophic breach of decorum and marriage. My heart was hammering against my ribs, each beat a painful thud. I looked at Julian, my husband, the father of my unborn child, silently pleading with him to deny it, to laugh it off, to call it a misunderstanding, to throw this woman out and wrap me in his arms. He did none of those things. He simply stood there, frozen, his face a canvas of guilt and fury. Chloe glided into the room, her heels clicking on the marble with predatory confidence. She completely ignored me, walking straight to Julian and placing a proprietary hand on his chest. "Aren't you going to introduce me?" she purred, looking around at the assembled family. My father, David, ever the protector, stepped forward. "Who are you?" "I think you have the wrong house." Chloe laughed, a sound that was both musical and utterly devoid of warmth. "Oh, I'm definitely in the right house. This is where Julian lives, isn't it? Or at least where he lives with her." She finally deigned to look at me, her eyes raking over my pregnant form with undisguised contempt. "Julian," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Who is this woman?" He finally broke his silence, but his words weren't for me. They were for his mother. "Mother, I told you I would handle this." Handle this. The phrase echoed in my mind. This wasn't a random intrusion. This was something they knew about. My gaze shot to Isabella, and for the first time I saw the truth in her cold, calculating eyes. She knew. She had known all along. The nursery, the feigned excitement for the baby, it was all a charade. "Your timing is atrocious, Chloe," Isabella said, her voice like ice chips. "This is a private family dinner." "Oh, but I am family," Chloe retorted, her smirk widening. "Or I will be soon enough, once Julian finally gets rid of his little charity case." The insult hit me with physical force. "Charity case," I repeated, my voice cracking. "Julian, get her out of here now." My father commanded, his voice shaking with rage. He moved to my side, my mother right behind him, their bodies forming a protective barrier. "There's no need to be dramatic." "David," Julian said, finally finding his voice. He sounded like a petulant child, not a man caught in a lie. He pried Chloe's hand off his chest. "Chloe, this is not the time or the place." "And when is the right time, Julian?" She shot back, her voice rising. "You said you'd tell her after the baby was born. Then you said you couldn't. You keep moving the goalposts. I'm tired of waiting in the wings while she plays the perfect little wife in my house." "Your house," I choked out. The brownstone. Did you really think he paid for that with his trust fund? I paid the down payment. We picked it out together. You've just been living in it, she sneered. Every word was a poisoned dart finding its mark. The foundation of my life, the life I thought I had built with Julian, was crumbling beneath my feet. The home I loved, the future I imagined. It was all a lie, a carefully constructed deceit I had been too blind with love to see. Tears streamed down my face, hot and furious. How could you, Julian? How could you do this to me? To our baby? Elara, just calm down, he said, holding up his hands in a placating gesture that only fueled my rage. You're getting hysterical. It's not good for pregnancy. Don't you dare talk to me about my baby. I shrieked, a sound of pure agony tearing from my throat. This thing you've been doing behind my back while I was at home carrying your child. And I spun on Isabella. You knew. You let me believe this farce. Isabella merely raised a perfectly manicured eyebrow. My son's arrangements are his own affair. My only concern is the Ashford name and the continuation of our line. So the baby is just a means to an end. For you, an heir. And what about me? What was I supposed to be? It was Chloe who answered, her voice dripping with satisfaction. You were the incubator, sweetheart. A suitable, simple girl to produce the heir. So there were no custody complications with someone from his own social standing. But your job is almost done. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. I felt faint, the room tilting around me. I stumbled back, needing to put space between myself and these monsters. I backed away towards the grand staircase, my hand instinctively going to my belly. A desperate, primal need to protect my child from the vipers in this room. I want you out of my house, I said to Chloe. My voice gaining a sliver of strength from the protective maternal rage welling up inside me. Technically, it's my house, Chloe mocked. Get out, I screamed, pointing toward the door. Both of you, get out of this family's life. Julian's face, which had been a mask of panicked guilt, suddenly hardened. The cornered animal was gone, replaced by something cold and reptilian. You don't give the orders here, Elara, he said, his voice dangerously low. He started walking toward me, his steps slow and deliberate. Stay away from her, Julian, my father warned, moving to intercept him. But Julian just pushed past him. This is between me and my wife. He advanced on me until I was backed up against the newel post at the top of the stairs. The dizzying drop was right behind me. His sky-blue eyes were now stormy and dark. All the love I thought I had seen in them was gone, replaced by a terrifying emptiness. You've made a scene, Elara. He hissed, his voice a venomous whisper only I could hear. You've embarrassed me. You've embarrassed my family. This was all supposed to be handled cleanly, quietly. But you had to make it dramatic. Dramatic? I gasped, incredulous. You brought your mistress to a family dinner while I'm 7 months pregnant with your child, and you think I'm being dramatic. My words seemed to be the final spark. Something inside him snapped. The last vestige of the man I thought I knew vanished, replaced by a complete stranger, a monster wearing my husband's face. You were never good enough for me, he snarled. You were just convenient, and now you're an inconvenience. His hands came up not to hold me, not to comfort me, but to shove me. Time seemed to warp and stretch in the moment before the fall. I saw it all with a horrifying, preternatural clarity, the way Julian's knuckles whitened as he balled his fists, the ugly sneer that twisted his handsome features into something grotesque, The final chilling thought that flashed through my mind was not one of fear, but of utter disbelief. He wouldn't. He couldn't. But he did. His hands slammed into my shoulders with brutal force. It wasn't a stumble or an accidental trip during a heated argument. It was a deliberate, two-handed shove executed with cold, calculated intent. The force of it lifted me off my feet, my center of gravity destroyed in an instant. My back hit the empty air. For a split second, there was nothing but a terrifying weightlessness. The grand chandelier in the foyer seemed to rush up to meet me. I saw a kaleidoscope of inverted faces below. My mother's, her mouth open in a silent scream. My father's contorted in a mask of pure rage and disbelief. Richard Ashford, his face ashen, looking utterly impotent. Isabella, her expression unreadable, a statue of marble and ice. And then I heard it. A sound that would be seared into my memory, forever more painful than any physical impact. From the top of the stairs, Chloe's voice rang out sharp and triumphant. "Yes," she cried, followed by a short, sharp clap of her hands. It wasn't just a cheer. It was a victory cry. The sound of an obstacle being removed. My body twisted in mid-air, a clumsy, desperate attempt to protect my belly. The world spun, mahogany banister, flocked wallpaper, startled ancestral portraits, and then came the impact. The first blow was to my side against the unforgiving edge of a stair, knocking the wind from my lungs with a gasp. Pain, white-hot and blinding, exploded through my ribs. Then I was tumbling a rag doll with no control, each bounce and thud a fresh burst of agony. My head cracked against a baluster, and the world dissolved into a shower of glittering, painful stars. I felt a sickening snap in my wrist as I tried to break my fall. Finally, with a bone-jarring finality, I landed at the bottom. My body lay twisted and broken on the cold, unforgiving marble of the foyer floor. For a moment, there was a stunned, absolute silence, broken only by Chloe's triumphant little laugh from above. It was a sound of pure evil. Then chaos erupted. "Elara!" My mother's scream was primal, a sound of pure maternal terror that ripped through the silence. She and my father were scrambling down the stairs, their faces etched with a horror no parent should ever have to witness. "Call 911! Somebody call an ambulance!" My father roared, his voice cracking with panic as he knelt beside me, his hands hovering, afraid to touch me, afraid of the damage he might cause. I tried to speak, to tell them I was okay, but the words wouldn't come. A coppery taste of blood filled my mouth. My vision was swimming, the edges darkening. The pain was a living thing, a roaring inferno consuming my entire body. But there was a deeper, more profound terror that eclipsed even the physical agony, my baby. My hand, the one that wasn't broken, fluttered weakly to my abdomen. I couldn't feel her. No kick, no flutter, no familiar pressure. Just a dull, terrifying ache and a spreading warm wetness that I prayed was not what I thought it was. My baby. I managed to rasp the words, barely a whisper. The baby. It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. My mother sobbed, her tears splashing onto my cheek. Help is coming. Just hold on. Through the haze of pain, I looked up past my frantic parents. At the top of the stairs, the scene was a twisted tableau. Julian hadn't moved. He stood there looking down at the wreckage he had created, his face pale, but his eyes hard. The mask of the concerned husband was already beginning to form. This wasn't the act of a man who had lost his temper. This was the act of a man who had just executed a plan. Beside him, Chloe was no longer cheering. She was leaning against the banister, watching the scene unfold with a detached, almost clinical interest, as if she were watching a particularly dramatic scene in a movie. And Isabella was already in motion. She swept down the stairs, not towards me, but towards my father, who was fumbling with his phone, his hands shaking too badly to dial. "Give me that," she commanded, snatching the phone from his hand. "Peters, show the paramedics when they arrive. Richard, go to my study and call our lawyer, Bill Masterson. Tell him there's been an accident." An accident? The word cut through my pain-fogged brain. She was already spinning the story, crafting the lie. They weren't trying to save me. They were trying to save themselves. My father looked at her, his face a mask of incandescent fury. "An accident. Your son just pushed my pregnant daughter down a flight of stairs. We all saw it. You saw a hysterical pregnant woman lose her footing during a heated discussion," Isabella corrected him, her voice lethally calm as she spoke to the 911 operator. "My son tried to catch her. It was a terrible, tragic accident." The lie was so brazen, so complete, it was almost brilliant in its audacity. They were going to erase the truth right here, right now, while I was bleeding on their floor. As the first distant wail of sirens pierced the night, my consciousness began to fade. The faces above me blurred into indistinct shapes. But before the darkness claimed me completely, my eyes met Julian's one last time. In their depths I saw no remorse, no regret, no fear. I saw only the cold, hard glint of a problem being solved, and I knew with a chilling certainty that would follow me into the abyss that this was not the end of his plan. It was just the beginning. I awoke to the rhythmic, metronomic beeping of a heart monitor and the sterile antiseptic smell of a hospital. A dull, throbbing pain radiated from every part of my body. My left wrist was encased in a heavy plaster cast, and a sharp stabbing sensation in my side made every breath an effort. But none of that mattered. My first conscious thought, my only thought, was a frantic, desperate question. My hand, the one that wasn't broken, flew to my stomach. It felt different, smaller, emptier. A tidal wave of panic washed over me. "My baby." I croaked, my throat raw. "Where's my baby?" My mother, who had been asleep in a chair by my bedside, jolted awake. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, etched with exhaustion and grief. "Elara. Oh, thank God. You're awake." "Mom, the baby," I insisted, my voice rising with hysteria. "Is she—" I couldn't finish the sentence. The possibility was too monstrous to even voice. "Shh, darling, shh." She took my hand, her touch a small anchor in a sea of terror. "She's alive. She's here." Relief so potent and overwhelming it left me weak, flooded my system. "She's okay." My mother's face crumpled slightly, and the terror returned. "She was born last night, an emergency C-section. She's very small, Elara. 7 weeks premature. She's in the neonatal intensive care unit. She's a fighter, the doctors say. She's a real little fighter." The words barely registered. Born. She was born. In the violent chaos of the fall, my daughter had been forced from the safety of my body into the harshness of the world. I was a mother, but I hadn't even had the chance to hold my child. Tears I didn't know I had left streamed from my eyes. Tears of relief, of fear, of rage. A nurse bustled in, checking my vitals, her expression one of practiced professional sympathy. "It's good to see you awake, Mrs. Ashford. Your husband has been waiting outside. He's been here all night. Shall I let him in?" The name Mr. Ashford sent a jolt of ice through my veins. The memory of the fall came rushing back, not as a confusing blur, but in stark, vivid detail. The shove, Chloe's cheer, Isabella's cold command to call the lawyer. "No," I said, my voice hard and clear. "I don't want to see him." The nurse looked taken aback, but nodded. "Of course. Your parents are here. Do you need anything? Pain medication?" I shook my head, though every part of me was screaming in agony. I needed to clear my mind. I needed to think. After the nurse left, my father came in. He looked 10 years older than he had the day before. The fury in his eyes had been banked, replaced by a deep, simmering resolve. "The police were here," he said, his voice low. "They took a preliminary statement last night from everyone." "What did they say?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Exactly what you'd expect," he replied, his mouth a thin, hard line. "The Ashford version of events. Isabella did most of the talking. She painted a picture of you as an emotionally unstable pregnant woman, distraught over a simple misunderstanding. She said you got dizzy, stumbled, and that Julian lunged to save you, but only managed to make you lose your balance more. A tragic accident. And Chloe. They claimed she was a business associate of Julian's, who arrived at an inopportune moment. They said her cry of, 'Yes,' was a misheard 'heads up' or some other nonsense. They're unified. Richard, Isabella, Julian, a perfect united front of lies. The audacity of it was suffocating. They were going to gaslight me, gaslight the police, gaslight the whole world into believing their fiction. As if on cue, the door to my room opened, and Julian walked in, ignoring my explicit instructions. He was holding a ridiculously large bouquet of white lilies, and his face was arranged into a mask of heartbreaking concern. It was a masterful performance. "Elara, my love," he said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "Thank God you're awake. I was so worried." My father moved to stand between Julian and my bed. "She said she doesn't want to see you." "David, please," Julian said, his eyes pleading. "This is a family matter. I need to speak to my wife." He looked at me over my father's shoulder. "Darling, I am so sorry. I tried to catch you. I swear I never would have let this happen." The lie was so smooth, so practiced. Looking at him now, I saw the monster clearly. The charming man I had married was just a costume. "Get out," I whispered. "What?" He feigned confusion. "I said get out." I screamed the effort, sending a jolt of pain through my ribs. "I know what you did, Julian. I felt you push me." I heard her cheer. "You tried to kill me. You tried to kill our daughter." He actually had the nerve to look wounded. "Elara, sweetheart, the fall, the medication. You're confused. You're not thinking clearly. We all saw what happened. It was an accident." He took a step closer, and it was then that I saw it. On his expensive custom-made shirt cuff, there was a tiny, almost invisible speck of something, a faint red smear. Makeup. The same blood-red shade of lipstick Chloe had been wearing. He hadn't even bothered to wash his hands of her before coming to play the part of the grieving husband. That tiny detail broke the last thread of my composure. "There was lipstick on your cuff, Julian," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "Chloe's lipstick. Were you holding her hand for comfort after you pushed your pregnant wife down the stairs? Or did she kiss you for a job well done?" The color drained from his face. His mask of concern faltered, and for a fleeting second I saw the cold fury from the night before. He had underestimated me. He thought I would be a broken, weeping mess, easily manipulated. You're delirious. He snapped, his voice losing its gentle edge. Isabella warned me this might happen, that the trauma might make you fabricate things. Isabella can go to hell, and you can go with her, I spat. Get out of my room before I start screaming for security. My father put a firm hand on Julian's chest. You heard her. Leave. Now. Julian stared at me for a long moment, his eyes promising retribution. Then he turned, placed the lilies on a table with a thud, and stormed out of the room. As the door closed behind him, a terrifying realization settled over me. This wasn't just a divorce battle. This wasn't a custody fight. This was war. The Ashfords, with their limitless money, their powerful lawyers, and their complete lack of morality, were going to try to destroy me. They would paint me as crazy, unstable, and unfit mother. They would use my trauma against me. Lying in that hospital bed, broken and battered, I felt a surge of something stronger than fear or pain. It was rage. A cold, hard, diamond-sharp rage. They had tried to take everything from me. My life, my child, my sanity. They had failed, and I would make them pay. I looked at my parents, their faces a mixture of fear and pride. Dad, I said, my voice steady now. Call Liam, my friend from law school, the one who works in criminal defense. Tell him to get here now, and tell him to bring the best private investigator he knows. The first time I saw my daughter, she was in a clear plastic box, a fragile bird-like creature hooked up to a dizzying array of wires and tubes. They wheeled my bed down to the NICU, the journey through the sterile corridors, feeling like a pilgrimage. She was so tiny, her skin almost translucent, her chest rising and falling with the gentle puff of a ventilator. I pressed my hand against the incubator, a pathetic substitute for holding her, and whispered her name for the first time. Lily. I chose the name because lilies represent rebirth and resilience. In that moment, looking at her tiny, perfect face, her fists clenched as if she were already fighting, I knew she was the embodiment of both. She was my reason, my purpose, the fire that would fuel me through the darkness ahead. Every beep of her monitor was a reminder of what Julian had tried to extinguish. My old law school friend Liam Gallagher arrived that afternoon. He was the opposite of the Ashfords' sleek corporate lawyers. Liam was sharp, a little scruffy, with an Irishman's love for a good fight and an unshakable moral compass. He listened intently as I recounted the events, my parents occasionally interjecting with their own observations. He didn't interrupt his pen scratching furiously across a legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. Okay, he said. This is David versus Goliath Elara. Their version is neat, tidy, and backed by a fortune that can buy the best legal team in the state. They will say you're suffering from postpartum psychosis, that the trauma of the accidental fall has caused delusions. They will use your grief and anger as weapons to prove you're unstable. But we all saw him push me, my mother insisted, and they will say you are biased parents naturally siding with your distraught daughter. Liam countered gently. It becomes a he said, she said situation, and in those cases the side with more power and influence often wins. So what do we do? I asked, my voice flat. We fight smarter, Liam said, a spark lighting up in his eyes. They have a narrative. We need to dismantle it piece by piece with irrefutable facts. The private investigator I work with, a guy named Marcus Thorne, is the best. He's ex-NYPD, and he can find a grain of sand in a desert. I've already put him on it. The first move from the Ashford camp came swiftly. A team of lawyers led by the legendary and notoriously ruthless Bill Masterson filed a motion to be granted temporary medical guardianship over me, citing extreme emotional distress and delusional ideation. It was a transparent, disgusting ploy to control my medical care, my access to Lily, and the narrative. They wanted to isolate me to have their own doctors declare me mentally incompetent. Liam fought it with a ferocity that stunned me. He got sworn, notarized affidavits from my parents and the entire staff of my OB/GYN's office, all attesting to my stable and happy mental state throughout the pregnancy. He brought in a renowned independent psychiatrist who interviewed me and declared me traumatized, but perfectly lucid and competent. The judge, a stern but fair woman, named Judge Carol Riley, saw through the Ashfords' maneuver and threw their motion out, granting my parents temporary power of attorney at my request. It was the first small victory, and it felt like moving a mountain. The days that followed were a grueling routine. Physical therapy to learn to walk again, agonizing sessions with a hand specialist for my shattered wrist. And every precious hour I spent by Lily's incubator, reading to her, singing to her, telling her stories about the world that was waiting for her. She was getting stronger. Her lungs were developing. She was gaining weight. And one day, she wrapped her tiny fingers around mine with a surprising strength. That small act of connection felt more powerful than the entire Ashford empire. Meanwhile, Marcus Thorne, the PI, began his work. He was a quiet, observant man who blended into the background. He started by digging into Julian and Chloe. Julian's carefully curated public image began to crack under Marcus's scrutiny. He wasn't just a philanderer, he was a financial predator. Marcus uncovered a pattern of Julian charming, wealthy older women getting access to their finances through investment opportunities and then leaving them high and dry. Chloe, whose real name was Charlotte Jenkins, was not the wealthy socialite she pretended to be. She was an ambitious grifter from a poor background with a string of minor fraud charges and a reputation for attaching herself to powerful men. She and Julian were a match made in a sociopath's heaven. But the most damning discovery was about the finances of Ashford & Sons. My father, being a brilliant economics professor, had helped Richard Ashford restructure the company years ago, and as a gesture of thanks, they had set up a significant trust fund in my name upon my marriage to Julian. A trust fund that I controlled. It contained a large block of non-voting shares, but it had clauses, one of which stipulated that upon the birth of a legitimate heir, control of the trust would become joint between me and Julian, and in the event of my death it would pass to him entirely provided the heir survived. If both the heir and I died, it would revert to the Ashford main estate. He wasn't just trying to get rid of you to be with Chloe, Liam explained, pacing my hospital room. He was trying to get his hands on that trust. Your pregnancy complicated his timeline. If he divorced you, you'd walk away with the trust intact. But if you had a tragic accident and died but the baby survived, he would get control of millions. The cold, mercenary logic of it was sickening. I wasn't a wife to him. I was a financial instrument. Our child had a key to a vault. But how do we prove it? I asked. It's a great motive, but it doesn't prove he pushed me. We're working on it, Marcus said, his voice a low rumble over the phone. The Ashfords are buttoned up tight. The staff at the estate are loyal or scared. No one is talking. Just as we hit this wall, the Ashfords launched their next attack. They filed for dual custody of Lily. Their petition was a work of fiction, painting me as a vindictive, mentally fragile woman from an unstable background who was manipulating her child's health for financial gain. They included a fabricated story about me threatening to harm myself and the baby earlier in the pregnancy. It was pure, unadulterated evil. Reading the court documents, I felt a wave of despair so profound it almost drowned me. How could I fight this? They were creating an entirely false reality and had the money to make the people believe it. That night, as I sat by Lily's incubator watching her sleep, I felt utterly defeated. I rested my head against the plastic, the barrier between me and my child, and I wept. A soft-spoken nurse, a woman named Maria, who had been particularly kind to me, came over and placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. She was an older woman from El Salvador, with kind, weary eyes that had seen too much. "She is a strong one, your Lily," Maria said in her gentle accented English. "I hope so," I whispered. "She's going to need to be." "Children know," Maria said softly. "They know who loves them. The courts, the lawyers. They are just noise. The heart of a mother. That is the truth." Her simple words of kindness were a balm. But then she hesitated. She glanced around the quiet, dimly lit NICU, as if to ensure no one was listening. "Senora Ashford," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "Forgive me. It is not my place. But my cousin works at the estate in Connecticut, as a housekeeper." I sat up, my heart suddenly beating faster. "The Ashford estate?" Maria nodded, her expression fearful. "She is afraid. They are powerful people. She has a family to feed. But her conscience, it eats at her. She saw something that night. Something before the accident." A jolt of adrenaline shot through me, clearing away the despair. "What did she see?" Maria wrung her hands. "She is afraid to speak, but she told me. She saw Mr. Ashford and the other woman, the one in the red dress. They were on the stairs. An hour before the guests arrived. They were practicing." "Practicing?" I repeated, my blood running cold. "Yes," Maria whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "He was showing her how a person could trip, how to make it look like an accident. He pushed her, but gently. They were laughing." Maria's words hung in the sterile air of the NICU, more potent than any medicine. Practicing. Laughing. The image was so monstrous, so utterly depraved, that it took my breath away. This wasn't a crime of passion or a spontaneous angry shove. This was a premeditated, rehearsed act, a performance for which I was the unwitting and intendedly final audience. "Her name," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of horror and hope. "What is your cousin's name?" "Isabella," Maria whispered, a flicker of a sad smile on her face. Like the lady of the house, my aunt had a strange sense of humor. Her name was Isabella Rossi. Getting Isabella Rossi to talk was like trying to coax a terrified mouse out of a wall. She was petrified of the Ashfords. They weren't just her employers. They were feudal lords who controlled the livelihoods of half the town. Losing her job was the least of her fears. She was afraid of what they might do to her family if she spoke out. Liam and Marcus handled it with incredible sensitivity. They met her not in a sterile office, but at her sister Maria's small, cozy apartment, a world away from the cold marble of the Ashford estate. Marcus, with his calm and reassuring demeanor, explained the legal protections for witnesses. Liam laid out the case, not as a legal strategy, but as a fight for justice for a mother and her baby. Tearfully, Isabella recounted what she had seen. She had been polishing the silver in the dining room, the doors to the foyer slightly ajar. She'd heard Julian and Chloe's voices and their laughter. She peeked through the crack and saw them at the top of the grand staircase. She described the scene exactly as Mariah had Julian demonstrating how someone could accidentally be knocked off balance, Chloe playing the part of the falling victim, both of them laughing as if it were a game. She had thought it was a sick, bizarre joke at the time and had hidden herself away deeply unsettled. When she heard my scream later that night, she knew instantly what had truly happened. Isabella Rossi's testimony was the crack in Ashford's fortress. It was motive and premeditation delivered by a credible, sympathetic witness. But Liam knew it wasn't enough. The Ashford lawyers would tear her apart on the stand, paint her as a disgruntled employee, a liar seeking a payout. "We need more," Liam stated during a strategy session in my new, much smaller apartment, which my parents had helped me secure after I was discharged from the hospital. "We need something they can't dismiss as hearsay. We need something concrete." That something concrete came from an unexpected source, Richard Ashford. Marcus had been digging into Richard's life, assuming he was just a spineless accessory to his wife and son's crimes. But what he found was a man living in quiet desperation. Richard was a prolific, albeit secret, gambler. He had debts, massive ones, to some very dangerous people. And Julian knew it. Our next breakthrough came from a deep dive into the Ashford & Sons company servers. Liam hired a forensic accountant who, after weeks of peeling back layers of complex financial transactions, found a black hole. Millions of dollars were being siphoned out of the company through a series of shell corporations with untraceable names. The transactions were authorized by a single executive IP address, Julian's. He was embezzling from his own family's company on a colossal scale. "And here's the kicker," the accountant said, pointing to a line on a spreadsheet. "The siphoning started 18 months ago, but it ramped up exponentially in the last 6. He was getting sloppy reckless. Someone was bound to notice." "Me," I whispered, realization dawning. A few weeks before the incident, Julian asked me to sign some papers from the trust. He said it was routine portfolio diversification. I told him I wanted my father to look them over first. David is an economist. I trust his judgment. Julian got furious, said I didn't trust him. He eventually dropped it, but he was furious. Liam's eyes lit up. "Let's see those papers." It took some doing, but we managed to get copies from the trust's administrative office. We sent them to the forensic accountant. The verdict came back in less than an hour. They weren't diversification papers. They were authorization forms that would have given Julian sweeping discretionary power over the trust's principal assets. It would have allowed him to use the trust as collateral to move its funds through his shell corporations, effectively giving him access to the very money he needed to cover up his embezzlement before the annual audit. "He wasn't just trying to get the trust after your death," Liam explained, piecing it all together. "He was trying to get access to it before the audit. You asking your father to review the papers threw a wrench in his plans. He was on a deadline. The company audit was scheduled for November. He was running out of time and options." The final piece of the puzzle slotted into place. Julian was using his father's gambling debts as leverage. "Cover for me, Dad, or I'll expose your debts to Mom. And we all know what she'll do." Richard, trapped between a rock and a hard place, had chosen to protect his son, becoming a silent partner in the lie. We now had the complete picture. It wasn't just a story of infidelity. It was a story of massive financial fraud, blackmail, and attempted murder for profit. Julian didn't just push me to be with Chloe. He pushed me because I was an obstacle to the biggest heist of his life. He needed me out of the way, either dead or declared mentally incompetent, before the auditors arrived and his entire house of cards came crashing down. Armed with this mountain of evidence, Isabella Rossi's witness statement. The proof of embezzlement, the fraudulent trust documents, and Richard's gambling debts. Liam went to the district attorney's office. He laid out the entire sordid story. The DA, a sharp, ambitious woman who smelled a high-profile conviction, listened intently. The tragic accident was now looking like a meticulously planned, financially motivated attempted murder. She convened a grand jury. Indictments were handed down for Julian Ashford on charges of attempted murder, aggravated assault, and multiple counts of felony fraud and embezzlement. Chloe Jenkins was indicted as a co-conspirator for attempted murder and for fraud, and in a move that shook the Connecticut elite to its core, Isabella and Richard Ashford were indicted for obstruction of justice and conspiracy after the fact. The Ashford Empire, which had stood for generations on a foundation of power and intimidation, was about to be brought to its knees by a quiet housekeeper, a brilliant accountant, and a woman who had simply refused to be broken. The trial was a media circus. The story had everything old money. A beautiful victim, a handsome villain, sex betrayal and attempted murder. The press dubbed it the staircase scandal. Every day we had to push through a throng of reporters and camera crews to get to the courthouse. The Ashfords would arrive in a black town car, Isabella looking regal and defiant, Julian looking like a wronged martyr, and Richard looking like a ghost. Their defense strategy was exactly what Liam had predicted, to assassinate my character. Their lawyer, Bill Masterson, was a master of insinuation and theatrical outrage. He painted me as a gold-digging, hysterical woman from a lower-class background who had become unhinged by the pressures of her pregnancy and the realization that her husband was leaving her. He claimed I had launched myself down the stairs in a desperate, manipulative bid for sympathy. It was excruciating to sit there and listen to the lies to have my deepest pains twisted into weapons against me. But every time I felt my resolve waver, I would look at a picture of Lily on my phone. She was thriving now, a beautiful, healthy baby who had finally come home from the hospital. She was my anchor, my strength. I was doing this for her. The prosecution, led by the unflappable DA named Adrienne Powell, built their case methodically. They started with the doctors and paramedics, who testified to the severity of my injuries, establishing that they were consistent with a violent multi-impact fall, not a simple trip. Then my parents took the stand, their testimony heartbreaking in its raw honesty. Masterson tried to rattle my father, accusing him of having a vendetta against Julian, but my dad remained steadfast, looking the jury in the eye and stating, "I saw what I saw. He pushed my daughter." The turning point of the trial was Isabella Rossi. When she walked to the witness stand, she was visibly trembling, a simple, hard-working woman thrust into a world she didn't understand. Masterson was merciless in his cross-examination, sneering at her, questioning her memory, her eyesight, her motives. "Isn't it true, Ms. Rossi, that you were fired from a previous job for stealing?" he boomed. "No, sir," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "That is not true." "Isn't it true that Ms. Vance's lawyers are paying you for this testimony?" "No, sir. They are paying for my protection because I am afraid of what your clients will do to my family. But they are not paying me to lie. I am here because God will not forgive me if I stay silent." Her simple, powerful sincerity resonated with the jury in a way no legal theatrics could. You could see it in their faces. They believed her. Then came the financial evidence. The forensic accountant walked the jury through the labyrinth of shell corporations and illegal transfers, presenting a clear, undeniable trail of fraud leading directly to Julian. The fraudulent trust papers I had refused to sign were presented as Exhibit A for his motive. When Chloe took the stand, it was clear she had made a deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, she was testifying against Julian. Her story was a self-serving masterpiece of deflection, painting Julian as a manipulative monster who had preyed on her ambitions. But in her attempt to save herself, she corroborated everything. She admitted Julian had told her about the trust fund. She admitted he had been panicking about the upcoming audit. And most chillingly, she admitted to the rehearsal on the stairs. He said it was a contingency plan, she said, avoiding looking at Julian, in case she became difficult. He laughed about it. He said she was so clumsy everyone would believe it. Finally, it was Julian's turn. He was the picture of confidence, his testimony, a polished performance of the wronged husband. He was charming. He was emotional. He wept when he described the accident. It was a convincing show, but D.A. Powell was ready. She let him finish his story, and then she walked slowly toward him. "Mr. Ashford, you claim you loved your wife, that this was all a tragic accident, born from a moment of panic. Is that correct?" "Yes, absolutely," he said, dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief. "Then, can you explain this?" she asked, and a video screen flickered to life. It was security footage. Not from inside the house, the Ashfords were too smart for that, but from a camera on a neighboring estate pointing down the long, winding driveway. The timestamp was for 1 hour after I had been taken away in the ambulance. The footage showed Julian's car pulling up to the estate's gates. He got out of the driver's side. Then Chloe got out of the passenger side. They stood there for a moment, bathed in the car's headlights, and then Julian pulled her into his arms and kissed her a long, passionate kiss. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It was the laugh of a man who had just pulled off the perfect crime. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Julian's face went white. His carefully constructed facade shattered into a million pieces, revealing the smug, arrogant monster beneath. The jury was out for less than 3 hours. The verdict was read for each defendant separately. Richard and Isabella Ashford, guilty of obstruction of justice. Chloe Jenkins, guilty of conspiracy. And finally, Julian Ashford, on the charge of attempted murder, guilty. On the charge of aggravated assault, guilty. On all 17 counts of fraud and embezzlement, guilty. A wave of uncontrollable sobs shook my body. It was over. Justice, a concept that had seemed so distant and impossible, had finally prevailed. Across the room, I saw Isabella Ashford's mask of icy composure finally crack. She stared at her son, not with love, but with the cold fury of a CEO whose prize asset had just imploded. Julian simply stared ahead. His handsome face slack with shock. A man who had never in his life faced a single consequence, now facing the ultimate one. As they were led away in handcuffs, his eyes met mine one last time. There was no remorse, only a deep, burning hatred. But it didn't matter anymore. He was powerless. The monster was back in his cage. In the end, my story didn't conclude at the bottom of that staircase. It truly began there. While the Ashford empire and its lies crumbled into dust with Julian, Chloe, and his parents all facing justice behind bars, I was rebuilding my own world. It is no longer a gilded cage, but a home filled with the genuine love of my family and the beautiful, bright laughter of my daughter Lily. She is my daily proof that even from the deepest darkness, an even stronger light can emerge. Our journey is a testament that truth is a relentless force, and nothing is more powerful than a mother's will to protect her child. If this story of survival and justice resonated with you, please show your support by hitting the like button, sharing this video, and subscribing to the channel for more powerful stories. Thank you for listening.